Today we are drinking Elspeth's Macchiato, a variation on a White Russian. Stay tuned for the recipe. In the meanwhile, an abridged telling of the life of Elspeth Tirel. Arriving on Capenna with her mother as refugees from an unknown plane, young Elspeth soon found herself under the heel of the Phyrexians. These biomechanical monsters ruled the plane and dealt many abuses to its denizens. In her youth, Elspeth and her mother were imprisoned by the Phyrexians and forced to be playthings for those Phyrexians who were flawed or not yet complete. One day, after having been locked in their cell for more than a week, a Phyrexian unceremoniously ripped the throat from Elspeth's mother, killing her. Following this, Elspeth made an attempt to escape alongside a young boy. Trying to smuggle themselves out of the prison, they hid amongst the corpses. This, however, failed. They were spotted by the Phyrexians and assaulted. In this moment, Elspeth's planeswalker spark ignited, and she was pulled from Capenna, saving her. In her escape from Capenna, Elspeth first arrived on Theros. There she met the champion Daxos, becoming friends with the warrior and acquiring the Sword of Chaos. But she was not long for that plane, not at this time. Elspeth continued to wander the plains in search of respite, eventually finding herself on the Alaran plane of Bant. Bant offered the young Elspeth what she was looking for: peace, safety, community. Living here, she trained and studied to become a knight. Settling in the nation of Valeron and continuing her studies, she attained the rank of squire at age 17. Following her duties, Elspeth was knighted 3 years later at 20 years old, making her one of the youngest knights and one of the fastest to attain the rank. In her endeavors to reach this status, she hid her powers as a planeswalker and her origins on Capenna, keeping these a secret so as not to alienate herself from the other knights and squires. Elspeth succeeded in keeping her powers hidden until another planeswalker fell from the sky. An injured Ajani Goldmane appeared on the plane of Bant and intrigued Elspeth. Alongside monks and healers, she tended to his wounds and helped Ajani to recover. She had hoped that they would be kindred souls and reach an understanding, but the Leonin brusquely admonished her. His words bore a warning of an imminent battle. The conflux, the rejoining of the shards of Alara, was happening. Following this encounter with Ajani, Elspeth found herself in battle against warriors from the other planes of Alara, the Grixis and the Esper. In an encounter with the Grixis forces, Elspeth witnessed her squire fall. This pushed her to unleash her planeswalker powers and revive him while eliminating their opponents. As other Bant knights and squires witnessed this, they looked upon her with awe and reverence. Even though she had broken the laws of civility and honorable combat, she had won the day for them. Elspeth attempted to remove herself from her rank and title as a knight, but the Bant would not let her abandon her rank so easily. She continued to fight alongside them and found herself in conflict with the Esper forces. Here, at the Battle of Jess, she was grievously wounded by an Esper mage, forced to recover away from the fields of battle. She learned of the deepening troubles of Bant. As a result of the conflux, the rejoining of Alara, red and black mana was seeping into Bant. This was resulting in chaos and destruction of life as it had been known on the plane. Once able, Elspeth joined the Bant forces defending Giltspire Castle. There she aided in defeating the demon dragon Malfagor. But even in this success, Bant was forever altered and no longer partaking in the Conflux War. Feeling as she had failed to defend the Bant she knew and cherished, Elspeth once more planeswalked and fled to another plane. She returned to Urborg on the plane of Dominaria. The fetid island encouraged her mood of grief and loathing. To further envelop herself in these feelings, Elspeth partook in gladiatorial combat. Not only did these fights permit her to express her rage, she was also able to earn pay from them. Utilizing her training as a knight, she became a popular and successful gladiator. Watching her from the crowd in one such bout was none other than a Johnny. He had been attempting to track her down since she left Bant. His appearance in the crowd distracted Elspeth's combatant, and she pressed the advantage. In doing so, she exposed a Phyrexian mark on her opponent, and being enraged, attempted to kill him. A Johnny intervened, ending the fight and saving the man. After the fight, a Johnny confronted Elspeth and chastised her for leaving Bant and remaining in Urborg. They fought over the morality of her choice, and Elspeth sent Johnny away. Leaving her the knight's armor she left behind on Bant, a Johnny planeswalked from Dominaria. Elspeth then searched for the man she fought earlier, the one with the Phyrexian mark on his arm. She found him, and learned his name was Koth, a geomancer and a planeswalker from Mirrodin. Koth explained that his own home plane was being assaulted by the Phyrexians, and that his mark was to remind him of his drive to free Mirrodin. Elspeth decided to work with Koth, and joined him on his search for another planeswalker, Vincer. They searched Urborg for the man and found him tinkering with some Phyrexian technology. It was unknown to Vincer the full extent of what he was working on, but Koth and Elspeth recognized it. Koth lashed out and trapped Vincer's head in stone. Elspeth, though in shock, did continue to follow the geomancer as he forced Vincer to use the machine he had built to planeswalk all of them to Mirrodin. Koth explained that Mirrodin was becoming warped by the Phyrexians. A swamp landscape known as a Mephedros had begun to expand over the plain. Attempting to navigate the Mephedros and the dangers therein, Elspeth separated herself from her companions and began to wander the swamp alone. She soon found some refuge with a shaman who scolded her for her cowardice and encouraged her to live like the knight she had trained to be. Elspeth, leaving the shaman, rejoined Koth and Vincer, saving them from Phyrexian captors. Fleeing further into the landscape, they faced more and more of the Phyrexian forces on Mirrodin, eventually finding their way into subterranean tunnels and seeing where these Phyrexian armies were coming from. Pushing deeper and further through more Phyrexian forces and fighting all the way, the trio found Melira, a woman native to Mirrodin who had been experimented on by the Phyrexians. Freeing her from her imprisonment, they continued deeper and deeper. The group faced the Phyrexians and made their way to the Planeswalker and the creator of the plane of Mirrodin, Karn. He had been tainted by the Phyrexian oil and was dying. To free him, Vincer sacrificed himself and gave Karn his spark and life. With Karn by their side, they felt invigorated to rally against the Phyrexian forces. Attempting to create a strong resistance against the invaders turned out to be harder than anticipated, and ultimately futile. In the last battle against the Phyrexians, Koth used his geomancy to sink Elspeth into the earth and force her to planeswalk away from Mirrodin, now New Phyrexia. As she escaped, one of the invaders wounded her greatly, and she only barely made it out. In her delirious state, Elspeth planeswalked back to Theros, the plane she had escaped to originally all those years ago when she fled the Phyrexians on Capenna. Drawn to Theros for its connection to their gods, Elspeth herself drew the attention of those same gods, a result of her wielding the Sword of Chaos, a divine weapon that had fallen to the mortal realm when she first visited the plane. One god who paid special attention to Elspeth was Heliod, the sun god. Heliod attempted to kill Elspeth due to her ownership of the Sword of Chaos. However, her own planeswalker power rebuked him and saved her. In response, he decided to alter the sword into a spear, naming the weapon God-Ascend. Even with the weapon change, the Sword of Chaos was very much coveted by the other gods. In their attempts to take the weapon from themselves, they nearly destroyed the plane. After escaping the assaults from the gods, Elspeth found herself fighting a massive hydra, Polukranos. She was able to do what no one else had done before her and defeated the hydra, gaining notoriety and status as the champion of Heliod. For a time, Elspeth found peace on Theros, reuniting with Daxos, whom she had met at her original visit to the plane. However, she soon found herself taking advice from a satyr named Xenagos. The satyr told Elspeth and Daxos of a way to defeat an attacking army, and following his words, they did in fact win. But this was part of a greater plan by the satyr, who in the celebrations after the fight tricked Elspeth into killing Daxos. Xenagos used the revelry to become a god himself. Elspeth found herself chided by the gods and people on Theros, and fled from the city to find sanctuary amongst the Leonin. Here she would rejoin with her friend Ajani, and seek to defeat the newborn god Xenagos. The pair would travel to the realm of the gods, Nyx, and slay the satyr in a great battle. But this came at a heavy cost. As they made their escape from this realm, Heliod killed Elspeth with her own weapon. Ajani fled, and Elspeth found herself in the underworld. Even in death, there was not much rest for the planeswalker, as here she fought against the planeswalker Ashiok, who brought twisted nightmares to the plane of Theros. But Elspeth summoned a vision of Heliod's spear to her side, renaming it Shadow Spear. Using the summoned weapon, Elspeth rallied other mortals in the underworld and made her escape. In doing so, she directly fought Heliod once more, and by having promoted and passed her spear off as a real weapon of the sun god, she was all the more powerful and forced Heliod to yield, allowing Elspeth to gain her freedom and planeswalk from Theros once more. Leaving Theros, Elspeth made her way to Dominaria. On the plane, she once again met with Ajani, who gave her the name of her home plane, New Capenna. Ajani explained that the plane had once been under assault by the Phyrexians, but that they had been able to defeat them. Intrigued by this, Elspeth went to New Capenna to learn how this was possible. She found the plane to be different than she had anticipated, but worked odd jobs and investigated to the best of her abilities. Through her endeavors, Elspeth learned of a magical substance known as Halo. This was used to enhance an individual's powers for short periods of time, and grant them a slight resistance to phyresis. It was so potent against the Phyrexians that even slight contact would cause them pain. On New Capenna, Elspeth came into possession of a sword infused with the Halo substance, calling the blade Luxior. She took her new weapon and the information she gathered and planeswalked back to Dominaria and to the Gatewatch, where she informed the other planeswalkers of Halo and how it could be used against the Phyrexian forces. But she was also informed that Ajani had been taken by the Phyrexians and altered, or completed, in their image. This news devastated Elspeth, but she remained with the Gatewatch. Here, she and the other planeswalkers trained and built up an army to prepare for the coming fight with the Phyrexians. Acting on their plan to return to New Phyrexia and defeat the invaders using a powerful artifact known as a Silex, the Gatewatch and Elspeth began their assault against the Phyrexian forces. On what was once Mirrodin, however, the plan began to fail. As a planeswalker, Jace Bellerin was incapacitated by the Halo substance, and when he regained consciousness, he only abandoned course in search of another planeswalker, Vraska. This led the whole team astray, and the diversion resulted in the death of one of their number, Nahiri. After attempting to continue their mission, Elspeth learned that Jace had been fully corrupted by the Phyresis, and she took the Silex and fled. Elspeth fled to the place between planes, the Blind Eternities. Here, she was given visions from her mother of Capenna being destroyed by the Phyrexians, and from Daxos of Ajani corrupting Theros. Finally, a vision from Sarah showed her New Phyrexia, where she had just fled from, and that her companions and allies were about to be corrupted by Jin Jataxis. Sarah then turned Elspeth into an archangel and faded away, leaving Elspeth to intervene with her newfound powers. Doing just this, Elspeth returned to New Phyrexia in time to save her allies and press their assault against Phyrexian forces. Now in full-fledged battle, Elspeth challenged and fought Elish Norn, the leader of the Phyrexian army. This direct assault ended in a stalemate as Elspeth departed the battlefield to aid her companions and the denizens of Mirrodin in their escape to the kingdom of Zalfir on Dominaria. Here she spoke with Koth and comforted him that their companion Malaria would die a hero for saving so many, including Ajani from Phyresis. After seeing that the refugees were able to be settled in and that her friends would recover, Elspeth left Dominaria once more. Last seen, Elspeth was on the plain of Tarkir investigating the dragon storms that threatened to flood every plane with feral dragons. Here she learned of an even greater threat, the return of Nicol Bolas. It would seem there is no rest or peace anytime soon for dear Elspeth Tirel. Today we are drinking Elspeth's Macchiato, a variation on a White Russian. You will need caramel vodka, coffee liqueur, Bailey's liqueur, heavy cream, and cinnamon sugar. Into a rocks glass with ice, add 2 ounces of caramel vodka. Followed by 1 ounce of coffee liqueur, then 1 ounce of Bailey's. Top with your heavy cream, using the back of a spoon to float. Then dust with cinnamon sugar. A rich, decadent drink that is very sweet and is very strong. It will help you to unwind after having to save a whole plane of existence. Enjoy responsibly.